What if the dead could reach back, not with whispers or shadows, but with something solid, something you could hold, something delivered by the United States Postal Service? Imagine the impossible object lying innocently on your doormat, familiar handwriting on a postcard, sent by someone you buried 5 years ago. Imagine the postmark, stamped yesterday. Arthur Finch didn't have to imagine. The thin piece of cardstock felt impossibly heavy in his hand, heavier than paper and ink. It carried the weight of a reopened grave, a shattered reality. 5 years Elena had been gone, 5 years of suffocating silence, and now this, a message that defied logic, defied death itself. Serpent's Tooth Mountain stared back at him from a glossy picture, majestic, indifferent, but the ink on the back, the date, it whispered of secrets far darker and stranger than the quiet grief Arthur had learned to live with. Arthur Finch's world was bound by the comforting Dewey Decimal System and the hushed reverence of the Oakhaven Public Library. He was a man who found solace and order in the quiet companionship of books. His life, since Elena, had become a study in meticulous, gray routine. Wake coffee, work among the silent stacks, home the house that still echoed with her absence. It wasn't haunted by a ghost, not in the traditional sense. It was haunted by the lack of her. Her vibrant, unruly presence had been replaced by carefully preserved relics, a shelf of her favorite poetry books, spines uncracked since her death, her collection of brightly colored ceramic birds gathering dust on the mantelpiece, the faint scent of lavender that sometimes clung stubbornly to the spare room where she used to paint. Elena, she had been the opposite of his quiet nature, full of laughter that seemed too loud for their small town, driven by an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond Oakhaven's borders. She collected experiences the way he collected first editions, hiking treacherous trails, sketching wildflowers with fierce concentration, dragging him on spontaneous road trips that inevitably involved getting lost and discovering something wonderful. Her energy had filled the house, the town his life, and then Serpent's Tooth Mountain had claimed her. The official story was tragically simple. A solo hike on the western slope, a sudden, violent summer storm rolling in off the peaks, a misstep on a rain-slicked trail, a fall into the deep, shadow-filled ravine known locally as the Devil's Gullet. Search parties had found signs, footprints near the edge, a torn piece of her windbreaker snagged on a rock, her emergency whistle lying nearby, enough to paint a clear picture of accidental death. Her body, however, remained lost to the unforgiving terrain, swept away by flash floods in the ravine's depths or hidden beneath subsequent rockfalls, the mountain refusing to give up its dead. Arthur had held memorial service, accepted the condolences with numb politeness, and received a folded flag from an honor guard comprised of park rangers. He buried an empty coffin beneath a granite headstone bearing her name, the dates of her too short life, and the hollow words beloved wife. He'd learned to live with the ambiguity of no final resting place, accepting the mountain as her tomb. His days settled into a predictable rhythm of quiet grief. Work provided structure, a necessary distraction. Evenings were spent reading, the silence broken only by the ticking grandfather clock in the hall, her clock, bought on a whim at an antique store. Weekends meant a solitary walk to the cemetery, placing fresh daisies, always daisies, before the cold stone marker. He'd talk to her then, sometimes, softly recounting mundane details about library patrons or the overgrown state of the rose bushes she'd planted. It was a ritual of remembrance, a way to keep her close while acknowledging her absolute, irreversible absence. Life wasn't lived, merely endured. Until that Tuesday, he'd come home later than usual, delayed by a shipment of new acquisitions at the library. The mail lay fanned out on the floor just inside the door, illuminated by the weak afternoon sun slanting through the window. Bills, the usual junk, a catalog he didn't remember requesting. And beneath them, partially obscured, the postcard. He saw the picture first, the jagged, instantly recognizable silhouette of Serpent's Tooth Mountain against a dramatic, cloud-filled sky. Elena's favorite view. She must have painted it a dozen times. He picked it up casually, assuming it was junk mail using a local landmark. Then he flipped it over. His blood ran cold. The world tilted slightly, the familiar hallway suddenly feeling alien. Looping, slightly slanted, utterly familiar script filled the back. Elena's handwriting. Not a copy, not a forgery. Hers. His fingers tightened on the card, the edges digging into his palm. He felt a strange buzzing in his ears. He forced himself to read the words, each one landing like a physical blow. Dearest Arthur, it began, the affectionate term she always used. Thinking of you always. Remember this view? The air here is so crisp. All my love. Simple, warm, impossible. An echo from a life abruptly terminated 5 years ago. His gaze snagged on the postmark in the upper right corner. A standard black ink stamp. Oakhaven Postal Annex. The small substation near the edge of town. And the date, printed with chilling clarity. October 15th, yesterday. Not 5 years ago. Not lost in some dusty mailbag for half a decade. Yesterday. Arthur stumbled back, hitting the wall, the postcard clutched in his hand like damning evidence. His mind, usually so ordered, fractured into 1,000 panicked thoughts. A mistake? Could the post office have reused an old card, found somewhere, and mistakenly stamped it with the current date? It seemed ludicrous. Postal regulations, dating procedures, it just didn't happen. A prank? The idea felt like swallowing acid. Who would commit such a monstrous act of cruelty? Their friends were kind, grieving Elena alongside him. His own family was distant, uninvolved. Elena's estranged sister, Clara? There was bad blood there, resentment over inheritances and past slights. But this felt too personal, too intimate. To mimic Elena's hand so perfectly, to know her favorite view, her sign-off, it required a depth of knowledge, a calculated malice that seemed beyond even Clara's bitterness. He sank onto the bottom stair, the worn carpet rough beneath his hands. He stared at the postcard, tracing the loops of the E in her signature with a trembling finger. It was her. Every nuance, every slight imperfection he knew so well. He could almost feel her presence beside him, smell the faint scent of turpentine that always clung to her clothes after painting. But she was dead, declared dead, mourned, remembered in granite and fading photographs. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, a physical pressure building behind his eyes. He held in his hand irrefutable proof that his reality was wrong. He thought about the details. The crisp air mentioned in the message. Elena had always loved the sharp bite of autumn air in the mountains. Remember this view? A shared memory, implicit in the image itself. All my love, the familiar closing. Everything pointed to her. The house suddenly felt different. The comforting silence now seemed watchful, charged with an electric undercurrent of the unknown. Was this a miracle? A second chance whispered from beyond the veil? Or was it something else? Something designed to torment, to unravel his carefully managed grief? The postcard offered no answers, only a terrifying question mark hanging heavy in the still air. Who sent this impossible message? And why? The first thread had been pulled. The postcard became an obsession. Arthur carried it with him, transferring it from his bedside table in the morning to his jacket pocket, taking it out periodically throughout the day at the library, hiding in the quiet reference section to stare at it again. He'd hold it up to the light, scrutinizing the paper, the ink, the postmark, searching for any flaw, any sign of forgery or manipulation. There was none. It was maddeningly, terrifyingly ordinary, except for the sender. He knew he couldn't function like this, living with the impossible secret festering inside him. His librarian's training demanded investigation, facts, logical conclusions. He had to pursue rational explanations, even if they felt increasingly threadbare. His first stop was the Oakhaven Postal Annex itself, the small branch office whose stamp adorned the card. He bypassed the main post office downtown, hoping the smaller branch might yield more specific information. Perhaps a clerk who remembered something unusual. The annex was a cramped, slightly neglected building smelling faintly of dust and stale coffee. A single clerk, a young man with tired eyes and an air of profound boredom, manned the counter. Arthur approached hesitantly, feeling foolish, rehearsing his explanation. He slid the postcard across the counter. He explained the situation as calmly as he could. His wife, Elena, deceased 5 years, the impossible date on the postmark. He watched the clerk's face for any flicker of recognition, any sign of confusion or error. The clerk picked up the card, glanced at the front, then the back, his expression unchanging. He checked the postmark. "Yes, that's our stamp," he confirmed flatly. "October 15th? Yeah, that was yesterday." Processed normally. He looked at Arthur as if waiting for the punchline. But could have been delayed? Arthur pressed, his voice tight with a frustration bordering on desperation. "Found somewhere after years and then stamped?" The clerk shrugged, leaning back against the sorting bins. "Highly unlikely, man. Stuff gets found sometimes, sure, but usually it gets marked found in mail or something. And the date, we stamp the date it goes through our machine. If it went through yesterday, it gets yesterday's date. Simple as that. Someone dropped this in a box or brought it here on the 15th. We stamped it, sorted it, delivered it. End of story." His nonchalance was infuriating. To him, it was just another piece of mail. To Arthur, it was a fissure in reality. He tried again, asking if they kept logs, if there were cameras near the collection boxes. The clerk just shook his head, clearly losing patience. No logs of individual postcards, man. Cameras? Maybe outside. City cameras, maybe, not ours. Look, I get maybe 100 postcards like this a day. Nothing special about this one. Arthur left the annex feeling more lost than before. The postal system offered no answers, only confirmation that the impossible had followed standard procedure. The logical avenues were closing. The prank theory still felt wrong, too cruel, too specific. But if not a prank and not a postal error, what was left? Back home, the silence felt heavier, more accusatory. He couldn't settle. Reading felt pointless. The ordered world of books a mockery of the chaos swirling in his own mind. He needed to do something. He went up to the attic, a place he usually avoided, filled as it was with the neatly packed boxes containing the physical remnants of Elena's life. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the bare bulb overhead. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, dried flowers, and forgotten things. He found the boxes labeled Elena, journals and sketches, and Elena, correspondence. He carried them downstairs, setting them on the large dining room table that had once hosted lively dinner parties, now usually covered in library paperwork. He opened the correspondence box first, finding bundles of letters tied with ribbon and stacks of postcards Elena had collected over the years. Scenes from national parks, quirky roadside attractions, European cities they dreamed of visiting. He spread them out, a colorful mosaic of places and memories. He picked up cards randomly, comparing the handwriting to the one he'd received. It was undeniably the same. The way she looped her L's, the precise slant of her T's, the characteristic flourish on her signature E. Perfect matches. Too perfect for a casual forger. As he meticulously examined card after card, his eye caught something he hadn't thought about in years. A tiny, almost invisible personal mark Elena sometimes added. Near the stamp or tucked away in a corner, she would occasionally draw a minuscule 5-pointed star, or more often a single deliberate pinprick, usually under the last digit of the year if the card was dated. It was an idiosyncratic habit, meaningless to anyone else. His breath hitched. He fumbled for the serpent's tooth postcard, holding it under the table lamp. His eyes scanned the postmark area, and there it was, beneath the final digit of the year in the date stamp. A tiny, faint indentation, a pinprick. A wave of nausea washed over him. This wasn't just mimicking handwriting. This was mimicking a secret habit, a personal quirk only he might vaguely recall. The prank theory shattered completely. No one else would know to do that. No one. It had to be Elena. But how? How could she be alive? And if alive, why this cryptic, painful contact? He turned to her journals, hoping for answers. Page after page detailed hikes, observations of flora and fauna, sketches of landscapes. He found entries about Serpent's Tooth, her fascination with its rugged beauty, her plans to explore its lesser-known eastern trails. He found the map he remembered seeing before, the one covering the Whisper Creek area, far from where her accident supposedly occurred. The strange symbols, triangles, circles, were still there, clustered near a ridge, and the date noted beside them, August 10th, roughly 2 months before her disappearance. What had she been planning? He traced the symbols with his finger. They weren't standard cartography. They looked almost like directions, landmarks, a private code. He remembered Elena sometimes inventing little symbol languages for fun when they were first dating. Could this be one? He spent the next few days immersed in Elena's papers, neglecting the library, calling in sick with a persistent cough that wasn't entirely feigned. His life narrowed to the confines of the house, the map, the journal, the impossible postcard. He cross-referenced the symbols on the map with descriptions in her journal entries from around that August date. He found mentions of 3 Sentinel Rocks triangles near Whisper Creek and a hidden spring with ferns circle. It was tenuous, fragmented, but suggested a deliberate exploration of that remote area shortly before she vanished. Sleep became a luxury. When he did sleep, Elena walked through his dreams, sometimes smiling and beckoning from a sunlit trail, other times turning away, her face obscured by shadow, leaving him with a sense of profound loss and confusion. He started hearing things. Floorboards creaking upstairs when he was downstairs, the faint whisper wind sounding like his name. Paranoia, he told himself. Grief playing tricks. But the feeling of being unsettled, of reality itself being thin and unreliable, persisted. The postcard had done more than deliver a message. It fundamentally altered his perception of the world, replacing the certainty of death with the terrifying ambiguity of the unknown. He was no longer just grieving. He was investigating a ghost. Exactly 1 week after the first postcard arrived, Arthur found the second one lying on the doormat. His heart lurched, a sickening combination of dread and anticipation. He almost didn't want to pick it up, afraid of what impossible message it might contain. The image this time was a widow's tears waterfall, a well-known, though less frequently visited, beauty spot located deeper in the national forest, east of Serpent's Tooth. It was within the general vicinity of the Whisper Creek area marked on Elena's map. He flipped it over, his hand trembling visibly now. The same handwriting. The same loving, impossible presence reaching across the void. My dearest Arthur, it read, the sound of the water is beautiful today. Reminds me of our trip to the coast, remember? Stay warm. All my love, E. Our trip to the coast. Anniversary number 3. A tiny, windswept cove accessible only at low tide. They'd spent the afternoon there, mesmerized by the crashing waves, sharing a thermos of lukewarm tea. He remembered laughing until his sides hurt when a particularly bold seagull made off with half his sandwich. Elena had recounted that story dozens of times. It was their memory-specific, detailed. No one else would know it, or phrase a reminder in exactly that way. And the postmark, Oakhaven Postal Annex, dated yesterday. Beneath the year, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, the tiny, deliberate... Arthur sank onto the entryway bench, the 2 postcards side by side in his lap. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. Serpent's Tooth. Widow's Tears. Both locations tangentially connected to the mysterious Whisper Creek area on her map. Both postcards mailed from Oakhaven, carrying intimate details only Elena could know, marked with her secret sign. The implications were staggering. Elena was alive, or someone with intimate access to her thoughts, her memories, her habits, was alive and sending these messages. The latter seemed even more disturbing. Somehow, but the handwriting, it felt like her, alive, hiding, reaching out. Why? Why hide for 5 years? Why fake her death, inflict that pain upon him? And why reveal herself now in this cryptic, agonizing way? The fear that had been a low hum intensified into a roaring panic, quickly followed by a surge of desperate resolve. He couldn't wait anymore. He couldn't live like this, caught between grief and this bewildering, terrifying hope. The postcards felt like breadcrumbs, clues leading somewhere. To her? To answers? He spread Elena's map out again, the topography of the wilderness stark under the lamplight. Serpent's Tooth, Widow's Tears, Whisper Creek, the annotations, the symbols. He traced a potential route connecting the locations, a path leading deeper into the remote eastern section of the forest, a place known for its dense woods, unpredictable weather, and near total lack of communication with the outside world, a place where someone could easily hide or get lost forever. He made a decision. It felt reckless, impulsive, more like something Elena would do than him. But the steady, quiet life he'd known was already gone, shattered by the first postcard. He had to follow the trail. He had to find the source of these messages. He had to know the truth, whatever it was. He spent the rest of the day gathering supplies, his movements jerky, fueled by nervous energy. He packed a sturdy backpack. Not Elena's. He couldn't bring himself to touch hers yet. With water bottles, high-energy food bars, a powerful flashlight with extra batteries, a first aid kit, a compass Elena had insisted he learn to use years ago, and her annotated map, carefully folded. He dressed in layers, choosing practical clothes ill-suited for his usual library environment. As he stood by the back door, ready to leave, his gaze fell upon Elena's old hiking boots, sitting where she'd left them after her last hike, or what he thought was her last hike, caked with dried mud, worn at the heels. Beside them leaned her favorite walking stick, a sturdy piece of polished hazelwood, its surface smoothed by years of her grip. He hesitated, then reached down and picked up the stick. It felt solid, grounding, a tangible connection to the woman he was pursuing, whether she was a ghost or a fugitive. He locked the house behind him, the click of the deadbolt echoing in the unnatural quiet. He got into his car, the engine turning over with a reassuring rumble that felt starkly at odds with the chaotic uncertainty churning inside him. He drove out of Oakhaven, leaving behind the life he knew, heading towards a dark, brooding silhouette of the mountains on the horizon. He was no longer Arthur Finch, grieving librarian. He was a man following a trail of impossible clues, drawn into the heart of a 5-year-old mystery that was terrifyingly, undeniably alive. The wilderness awaited, promising either answers or oblivion. The Forest Service road deteriorated quickly. Pavement yielded to jarring gravel, then narrowed to a deeply rutted dirt track barely wide enough for Arthur's modest sedan. Overhanging branches scraped against the car roof, and the dense canopy of pine and fir plunged the path into premature twilight, even though it was only mid-afternoon. He checked his phone instinctively. No signal, as expected. The isolation was immediate, profound. He consulted Elena's map, navigating by landmarks she'd noted, a peculiar lightning-scarred tree, a sharp bend in a shallow creek. He finally reached a spot near the edge of the Whisper Creek watershed that seemed to correspond with the start of the trail she'd marked with her cryptic symbols. He parked the car, pulling as far off the track as possible, hoping it wouldn't attract unwanted attention, though out here, attention seemed unlikely. Stepping out of the car, the silence hit him first. Not true silence, but the absence of human noise, replaced instead by the sighing rush of wind high in the pines, the distant chatter of a hidden stream, the occasional snap of a twig in the undergrowth. The air was cold, sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and pine resin. It felt ancient, watchful, gripping Elena's walking stick. Its familiar weight a small comfort. Arthur found a faint indentation in the brush that marked the start of the path. It was barely visible, overgrown with ferns and thorny bushes. Clearly, few people ever came this way. He pushed through the initial barrier of branches, feeling thorns snag at his jacket, and started walking. The going was slow, much harder than he'd anticipated. The path frequently disappeared under drifts of fallen leaves, forcing him to rely on the compass and Elena's map markings. He stumbled over hidden roots, slid on loose scree. His breathing grew heavy, his muscles protested. This was Elena's world, wild, unpredictable, demanding. He felt acutely aware of his own inadequacy, his librarian's body ill-suited for this rugged terrain. Hours crawled by. The forest seemed oppressing on him, the tall trees blocking out the sky, creating a disorienting, claustrophobic effect. He kept glancing nervously into dense woods on either side of the faint trail, imagining movement in the shadows, the glint of watching eyes. Was he being foolish? Was this a wild goose chase orchestrated by a cruel manipulator? Or was he truly following Elena's trail? He consulted the map again, trying to orient himself toward the ridge overlooking Whisper Creek that Elena had marked with triangles, the 3 sentinel rocks mentioned in her journal. The terrain steepened. He scrambled up a rocky incline, using the walking stick for balance, his heart pounding from exertion and anxiety. From the top of the ridge, the view opened up, revealing the deep, heavily forested valley below. Whisper Creek itself was invisible, hidden beneath the trees, but he could sense its presence. He scanned the panorama, searching for any sign of human activity. Smoke, a structure, anything. There was nothing but an unbroken expanse of wilderness. It was beautiful, imposing, and utterly empty. Discouraged, he checked the map again. Widow's Tears Waterfall, the location from the second postcard, should be further east, deeper into the valley system. He had to press on. As he started down the other side of the ridge, moving toward the area where the waterfall should be, his foot caught on something. He stumbled, catching himself with a stick. Looking down, he saw what tripped him. Not a root, but a small, unnaturally placed pile of stones. 3 flat stones, stacked neatly beside the nearly invisible trail. It could have been coincidence, a natural formation, but it felt deliberate, like a marker. Elena used to mark trails this way sometimes on their less frequent hikes. A jolt of adrenaline shot through him. He scanned the ground more carefully. A few yards further on, almost hidden beneath a clump of ferns, he saw another small marker, 2 sticks crossed in a specific way. Another sign Elena sometimes used. Someone had been through here, marking the path, recently enough that the signs hadn't been completely obliterated by nature. His pace quickened, despite his fatigue. He felt less like he was blindly searching, more like he was actively following. He descended into a damper section of the woods, the air cooler, the ground softer underfoot. And then he saw it, caught on the thorny branch of a low-hanging bush, snagged as if by someone pushing carelessly past, was a small scrap of fabric, faded turquoise blue, instantly recognizable. He stopped breathing for a second. He reached out slowly, his fingers trembling, and carefully detached the fabric. It was soft, worn thin in places. Elena's bandana. The one he'd bought her at that craft fair years ago. The one she always wore hiking. He held it tightly, the small piece of cloth feeling like a physical shock. It wasn't disintegrated, not brittle with age and weather. It felt recent, as if it had been torn off weeks ago, maybe months at the absolute most. Not 5 years. He looked around wildly. He knelt, examining the damp earth near the bush. Partially obscured by fallen leaves, he saw them, faint, blurred impressions. The edge of a boot print, maybe? A scuff mark where someone had stumbled or pushed off. Impossible to be certain, but suggestive. Someone had been here. Someone wearing Elena's bandana. The sound of falling water, a low roar that had been gradually increasing, now seemed much closer. He pushed through a final screen of trees and found himself standing at the base of Widow's Tears Waterfall. Water cascaded down a high, moss-covered cliff face into a clear, rocky pool below. It was exactly the scene from the second postcard. Majestic, isolated, Standing there, the roar of the falls filling his ears, the scrap of bandana clutched in his hand, Arthur knew this wasn't a ghost story. This wasn't a cruel prank orchestrated from afar. Elena, or someone inextricably linked to her, was physically present in this wilderness, moving through it, leaving traces, sending messages mailed from town. The questions multiplied. Why the secrecy? Why the elaborate staging? Who was she hiding from? He searched the area around the falls meticulously, driven by a new urgency. He checked the muddy banks of the pool, the rocks, the surrounding trees. He found nothing more. No clear footprints, no discarded items, no further clues. Just a waterfall, the forest, and a heavy weight of the unknown. But the bandana was enough. It was irrefutable proof connecting the past to the present, the supposed dead to the tangibly recent. He looked at Elena's map again, his eyes drawn irresistibly back to the cluster of symbols near Whisper Creek. The postcards hadn't just been messages. They were waypoints. Serpent's Tooth Viewpoint, Widow's Tears Waterfall. They were guiding him, step by step, deeper into this wilderness, toward the location marked by those strange symbols, towards the heart of the mystery, towards her. The sun was beginning to dip below the ridges, casting long, distorted shadows through the trees. The temperature was dropping noticeably. He had to decide. Turn back now, hike through the encroaching darkness to the relative safety of his car, or follow the trail onwards towards Whisper Creek, toward the unknown destination Elena seemed to be pointing him to. Fear coiled in his stomach, cold and tight. But the image of the bandana, the undeniable proof of her recent presence, solidified his resolve. He couldn't turn back now. He was too close. He tightened his grip on the walking stick, took a breath that felt thin and inadequate in the vastness, and turned towards the deepening shadows of the Whisper Creek Valley. He was following Elena's breadcrumbs into the lair of her secret. The path grew even fainter as Arthur descended into the Whisper Creek Valley. He relied almost entirely on Elena's map and the occasional cryptic marker she, or someone following her system, had left behind. A specific pattern of blazed bark on a tree, an oddly bent branch, another small cairn of stones almost swallowed by moss. Darkness seeped into the woods, thick and smothering. He switched on his flashlight, its powerful beam cutting a stark white tunnel through the gloom, making the surrounding blackness seem even more absolute. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. Every hoot of a distant owl felt like a warning. Fatigue was a heavy cloak now, draped over his shoulders, weighing down his limbs. Doubt gnawed at him. Was he chasing a phantom? Was Elena long gone from here, leaving only these faint traces? Was he walking into danger? He pushed the thoughts away, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other, on deciphering the next clue on the map. He estimated he'd been hiking for another 2 hours in the darkness when he smelled it. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, then stronger on the night air. Wood smoke. His heart leaped. Wood smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. He moved more cautiously now, switching off his flashlight, allowing his eyes to adjust to the deep gloom, guided only by the faint moonlight filtering through the dense canopy. He followed the scent, moving slowly, deliberately, trying to make as little noise as possible. The smell grew stronger, richer. Then, through a gap in the trees, he saw it. A faint, warm yellow glow. Lamplight. It emanated from a small hollow, maybe 50 yards ahead, slightly below him. He crept closer, using the massive trunks of ancient pines for cover, his breath held tight in his chest. Nestled in the hollow, almost perfectly camouflaged by the surrounding terrain, stood a small log cabin. It looked old, weathered, like something out of a forgotten era, but it wasn't abandoned. A thin tendril of smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney, dissipating into the night sky. Light spilled from a single small window. This had to be it. The destination. The source. Adrenaline surged through him, momentarily banishing his fatigue. He circled silently around the perimeter of the small clearing containing the cabin, staying deep in the shadows. He found a spot behind a thick tangle of rhododendrons that offered a partial view through the window. He peered inside. The interior was rustic, simple, a rough-hewn wooden table and 2 chairs. Shelves lined with jars, tins, and stacked firewood. A narrow bed covered with thick, colorful quilts. And sitting on the table, illuminated by the flickering flame of an oil lamp, was a pen, some loose sheets of paper, and a small stack of postcards. The top one showed widow's tears waterfall. Arthur's throat tightened. He scanned the room again. Propped against a jam jar on a shelf, catching the lamplight, was a small, framed photograph. He squinted, focusing. It was a picture of him, taken on their anniversary trip to the coast years ago. Him, smiling awkwardly into the camera, Elena's arm just visible slung around his shoulder, cutting her mostly out of the frame. A picture she had kept on her dresser. And beside the postcards on the table lay an open journal, bound in dark, worn leather, identical to the ones Elena always used. Even from this distance, he could recognize the handwriting on the open page. Looping, familiar, Elena's. The world stopped. The air left his lungs in a silent rush. Elena, alive, here, or here very, very recently, living in this hidden cabin, miles from anywhere, for God knows how long. The past 5 years, his grief, the memorial, the empty casket, the quiet endurance, it all collapsed inward, revealed as a facade built unknowingly around an agonizing truth. She hadn't died. She had chosen to disappear. She had let him believe she was gone. He stumbled back from the window, pressing his hand against his mouth to stifle a gasp. He sank to his knees behind the bushes, the cold, damp earth soaking through his trousers. Bile rose in his throat. Why? The question screamed in his mind, drowning out the night sounds, drowning out everything else. Why do this? Why abandon him, their life, everything? The betrayal felt absolute, a physical wound deeper than grief. Mixed with the anger, the hurt, was a confusing, treacherous flicker of hope. She was alive, but the implications of that fact were devastating. He needed answers. He couldn't just leave. He couldn't creep away into the night with this half-knowledge tearing him apart. He had to confront her. He had to understand. He stayed hidden, watching the cabin, his emotions warring within him. He waited. For what? For her to step outside? For courage? After perhaps 20 minutes of agonizing stillness, the cabin door creaked open. Arthur tensed, peering through the leaves. A figure emerged, silhouetted briefly against the warm lamplight before stepping into the shadowy clearing. His heart leaped. Elena? No. The figure was shorter, stockier. It was a woman, but older than Elena, her hair gray and pulled back tightly from a face lined with what looked like years of hardship and worry. She wore practical, dark clothing. She carried a small bundle of twigs, presumably for kindling, scanned the dark tree-line with sharp, assessing eyes, then quickly retreated back inside, shutting the door firmly behind her. A heavy wooden bar scraped into place on the inside. Confusion layered on top of Arthur's shock. Who was this woman? A caretaker? A companion? Was Elena inside with her? Or had Elena moved on, leaving this woman behind? He crept closer again, drawn by an irresistible need for more information. He moved to a different window, this one slightly grimy, but offering a clearer view of a different part of the small room. The older woman was now sitting at the table, her back to him, writing something by the lamplight. Then Arthur's eyes were drawn to the shadows beneath the narrow bed, partially obscured by a hanging quilt. He saw it, a familiar forest green backpack, scuffed and worn. Elena's backpack, the one she'd supposedly been carrying when she fell. And next to it, placed neatly side by side, a pair of hiking boots. Sturdy, broken in. Elena's size. Elena's preferred brand. There was no doubt left. Elena Finch had lived here. Recently. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. She had orchestrated her own disappearance. faked her death, and hidden herself away in this remote corner of the wilderness for 5 years. The librarian, the grieving husband, had followed a trail of impossible postcards to uncover not a ghost, but a deception of heartbreaking proportions. The reveal wasn't an ending, but the start of 1,000 agonizing questions, all overshadowed by the single, crushing word, why? Arthur waited in the cold darkness, hidden among the trees, the cabin a small pool of defiant light in the vast wilderness. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher, casting stark shadows. The light in the cabin window eventually went out, plunging the hollow into near total darkness. Silence descended, broken only by the sigh of the wind and the distant cry of some night creature. He couldn't stay out here. He was shivering, exhausted, and his mind was a tangled mess of fury, grief, confusion, and a sliver of terrifying hope. He had to know the full story. He couldn't leave without confronting whoever was inside, without understanding Elena's choices. Taking a deep breath, gripping Elena's walking stick like a shield, Arthur stepped out from the trees and walked across the small clearing to the cabin door. His boots crunched softly on the damp earth. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. He raised his hand and knocked, the sound sharp and loud in the stillness. Silence from within. He knocked again, harder this time. Waited. Heard a faint shuffling sound inside, then the scraping of a chair. A moment later, a gruff male voice, raspy with sleep or suspicion, called out, demanding to know who was there. Not the woman. A man. Arthur hesitated. Thrown again. He hadn't seen a man. He cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. My name is Arthur Finch. He called back. I received postcards. I need to talk to you. About Elena. A longer silence followed. Then the heavy thud of a security bar being lifted from inside. The door creaked open a few inches. A man's face peered out, deeply lined, weathered, eyes narrowed with suspicion in the faint moonlight. He looked to be in his late 60s or early 70s, tough and wary. He stated firmly that he didn't know anyone named Elena. Please, Arthur insisted, the desperation raw in his voice now. I know she was here. The postcards, the picture, her handwriting. I just need to understand. The man studied Arthur's face intently for a long moment. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years, he opened the door wider. Behind him stood the gray-haired woman Arthur had seen earlier, holding a newly lit oil lamp. Her expression was a mixture of fear and weary resignation. The man grunted that Arthur shouldn't have come here, but stepped aside, allowing him entrance into the small, warm space. The cabin was even smaller inside than it looked. The air smelled strongly of wood smoke, dried herbs, and something faintly medicinal. Arthur's eyes darted around, taking everything in. The simple furniture, the shelves of supplies, Elena's backpack, and boots still visible near the cold hearth. The journal lay closed on the table now. But Elena herself was nowhere to be seen. Where is she? Arthur asked immediately, his voice tight, turned to face the couple. They exchanged a heavy look, a silent understanding passing between them. The woman, whose name he learned was Martha, spoke first, her voice gentle despite her severe appearance. Elena isn't here right now, Mr. Finch. Isn't here? What does that mean? Is she coming back? Is she dead? The word felt absurd on his tongue now. No, not dead. The man, Silas, interjected quickly. She's gone. Had to leave. About 2 weeks back now. Urgent. Leave? Arthur repeated, bewildered. Why fake her death in the first place? Why hide here for 5 years? Why abandon everything? Abandon me? He gestured helplessly around the small cabin, the evidence of her hidden life. Martha pulled out one of the rough wooden chairs. Please, Mr. Finch, sit. It's a long story, a complicated one. Arthur remained standing for a moment, rigid with tension, then sank reluctantly onto the chair. Silas moved to the fireplace, coaxing the embers back to life, adding a small log, The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows that made the small space feel both intimate and confining. Martha sat opposite Arthur, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She began to explain, her voice low, earnest. 5 years ago, Elena hadn't fallen. There was no accidental death on Serpent's Tooth. While hiking in a remote area, exploring off-trail near where she left the symbols on her map, Elena had stumbled upon something she was never meant to see, a clandestine meeting deep in the woods. She didn't see faces clearly at first, but she heard enough. Talk of shipments, payoffs, threats. Then she saw one man more clearly as he turned. A prominent Oakhaven businessman, a man whose name was often whispering connection with shady dealings, known for his influence and his ruthlessness. Elena realized, with chilling certainty, that he had seen her too, just a flicker of movement in the trees before she ducked away. Knowing the man's reputation, terrified for her life, and instantly understanding the danger she might bring to Arthur if her connection to him was discovered, she made a desperate choice. Using her survival skills and intimate knowledge of the terrain, she raced away from the scene, heading towards a treacherous Devil's Gullet ravine on the other side of the mountain. There, she staged her accident, leaving her damaged emergency whistle, tearing a piece from her jacket, making tracks near the edge. Enough plausible evidence to convince searchers she had fallen victim to the storm that was indeed brewing. Then, under the cover of the worsening weather, she hiked east, deeper into the wilderness, for days, eventually finding her way here, to this cabin. Silas and Martha, she explained, were distant relatives, recluses who had lived off-grid for decades, wanting no part of the outside world. Elena had known of their existence, a family secret whispered about when she was younger. She threw herself on their mercy, explained her terrifying predicament. They took her in, sheltered her, helped her maintain her hidden existence. Martha leaned forward, her eyes pleading for understanding. She did it all to protect you, Arthur. She knew those men were dangerous. If they knew she'd seen them, and knew she had a husband, you would have been their first target to ensure her silence. Faking her death, disappearing completely, she believed it was the only way to keep you safe. Arthur stared, speechless. Elena, a witness to organized crime? Elena, living in fear, forced into hiding? It seemed impossible, yet terrifyingly plausible given her adventurous nature and occasional recklessness. He vaguely recalled the businessman Martha mentioned. He had indeed died suddenly about 6 months ago. A heart attack, the local paper reported. But the postcards? Arthur finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Why send them now? After all this time? Silas spoke then, his voice rough. That wasn't Elena's doing. Not directly. She wrote, sure, over the years. Especially after that fellow died. She started talking about maybe letting you know, but she was scared. Scared of what it would do to you. Scared the danger wasn't really over. She wrote the cards, addressed them, couldn't bring herself to send them, left them on the table. Martha picked up the narrative. Then, about 2 weeks ago, something spooked her bad. She got word. She had ways, kept her ear to the ground best she could out here, that someone was asking questions. In Ridley, the next town over, asking about people living rough in these woods, maybe matching her description. Not police. Someone else. She didn't know if it was connected to the old business, maybe loose ends, or something new entirely. But she couldn't risk staying. She packed her bag, that green one over there, grabbed her boots, and left, just vanished again. Deeper into the woods, maybe? Or tried to get out of the state. We don't know. She just told us if we didn't hear from her after a while, maybe send the cards. So you'd know she hadn't just died carelessly. So you'd know she loved you. Martha looked down at her hands. I found them after she was gone. I struggled with it. But knowing how much pain she was in, keeping this secret and thinking of you, I drove into Oakhaven last week. Mailed the first one from the annex box. Then the second one, a few days ago. I thought you deserved to know she was alive, that she chose this to protect you. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture far more complex and devastating than Arthur could have imagined. Elena was alive, had been alive all along. Her death was a desperate fabrication born of fear. Her silence was a shield meant to protect him. The postcards were echoes of her love and guilt, sent by a reluctant messenger after Elena had already been forced to flee again, vanishing into yet another layer of unknown danger. Relief warred with terror. She was alive, but she was also gone again, hunted, alone. The confrontation he had braced for hadn't happened. Instead, he was left with the crushing weight of her story, her sacrifice, and the terrifying uncertainty of her fate. He hadn't lost her to the mountain 5 years ago. He had lost her to the darkness she stumbled upon, and he was losing her again now, to the consequences of that discovery. The climax was not reunion, but the chilling understanding of their irrevocably fractured lives. Arthur stayed the night at the cabin. Silas and Martha insisted, offering him Elena's narrow bed while they took makeshift pallets near the hearth. Sleep, however, remained elusive. His mind endlessly replayed the story, picturing Elena's 5 years of hidden existence. The fear, the loneliness, the crushing weight of her secret love and sacrifice. He imagined her writing the postcards, pouring her heart onto the small squares of cardstock, unable to bridge the gap she herself had created. Where was she now? Was she safe? Would the people searching for her find her? The questions were agonizing, unanswerable. In the pale light of dawn, as Arthur prepared to leave, Martha pressed Elena's leather-bound journal into his hands. She left this, she said quietly, an oversight, perhaps, in her haste. Or maybe she wanted you to have it, to understand. He accepted it numbly. The hike back out of the wilderness felt vastly different from the journey in. The woods no longer felt menacing, just deeply, profoundly sad. He stopped occasionally, sitting on a fallen log, and read passages from the journal. Elena's familiar handwriting filled the pages, detailing not just her observations of the natural world she loved, but the inner turmoil of her hidden life. She wrote of the initial terror, the desperate flight, the crushing guilt that consumed her daily. She wrote of missing him with an ache that was physical, describing memories of their life together in heart-wrenching detail. She documented her near misses, times she thought she might have been discovered, her constant vigilance. He read about her cautious hope when news of the businessman's death reached her, followed by the renewed fear that led to her most recent flight. The last entry was hurried, panicked, ending mid-sentence. Someone asking questions in Ridley described, have to go now deeper in, maybe west towards. The rest was blank, reading her raw, unfiltered thoughts, her fear, her regret, her unwavering love for him despite the deception. Changed something within Arthur. The sharp edges of betrayal softened, smoothed over by a wave of immense sorrow and a reluctant, painful understanding. Her actions weren't born of malice, but of a desperate, flawed attempt to protect him in the only way she knew how. It was a terrible choice, one that had cost them both dearly. He finally emerged from the woods, reaching his car coated in dust and leaves. He placed a journal, the 2 postcards, and the scrap of turquoise bandana carefully on the passenger seat, the tangible fragments of his shattered reality. Driving back to Oakhaven was like returning from another planet. The familiar streets, the town square, the library, it all looked the same, yet felt fundamentally alien. His quiet house, once a sanctuary of grief, now seemed like a stage set for a play whose main actor had been living a secret life offstage. The mystery of the postcards was solved. They were Elena's final, delayed messages sent out of compassion by Martha. But the resolution only opened up a larger, more terrifying mystery. Where was Elena now? Was she safe? Would whoever was looking for her find her? What was he supposed to do? He couldn't go to the police. Revealing Elena was alive could put her, Silas, and Martha in immense danger, especially if the threat hadn't truly died with the businessman. Searching for her himself felt hopeless. The wilderness was vast, and her final journal entry gave no clear destination. He sat in his silent living room, the journal open before him, the postcards lying beside it. He was no longer just a grieving widower. He was the keeper of an impossible secret, the recipient of a love story rewritten into a thriller. He had gotten Elena back, not in body, but in truth, only to lose her again to the shadows. There was no neat ending, no true closure, only the heavy weight of knowledge, the gnawing uncertainty, and a profound ache of a love interrupted by violence and sacrifice. Arthur Finch, the meticulous librarian, was left adrift in the ambiguity. His wife was out there, somewhere alive, perhaps hunted, forever beyond his reach, but inextricably bound him by the truth delivered on a postcard, stamped yesterday. The silence of the house was no longer empty. It was filled with the echo of her desperate choices, leaving him suspended between loss and a fragile, fearful hope, forever listening for footsteps that might never arrive.